So what is a built-in function? Well, it's sometimes called a predefined function, and this is something which has been created by other programmers, and it's either embedded into the language you're using, so it's built into Python, for example, or it's saved as a module library, for example, random or math, that you can import into your program. So string manipulation functions are actually really useful. So if we look at this example pseudocode, we're setting up a variable called var a, and it's a string, and that string is going to hold the word computer with a capital C. I'm going to show you a number of functions and what the output from using those functions would be. So in this first example, we've decided to output var a square brackets 0. And what this does is this will find the 0th letter in the string variable. It only works with strings, and it will output it to the screen. So in this case, the first, or the 0th letter, is the capital C. And so I'll write this in blue so you can see the output. The next built-in function, called left, takes in a string variable, so in this case var a, and returns the first letter in from the left. So again, in this situation, we would get C. But left is much more flexible than our previous function. So if we decide to output more than one character from the left-hand side, all we have to do is change the number. So for example, output left var a, 4 will return comp. In the next string manipulation example, we've got a function called mid, and what mid does is it will give you a substring of variable a, which is computer. It starts at the first number position, so that would be 0, 1, 2, 3, so that's P, and then it will output the next 3 letters, so P, U, T, and so we should get an output of put. In our last example, we have a function called write, and write passes in variable a, and it's looking for 2 characters from the right hand side of the string that's been passed in, so R and E, and so it will output ER. And so far we've been dissecting strings, we've been taking little slices of the strings. But we can also join strings together, and so in pseudocode we have a function called concat, which will concatenate 2 strings together. So concat takes in 2 parameters, takes in variable a, which is the word computer, and I've just hard-coded a string for the second parameter, but we could use another variable if we had one. And so computer is concatenated with space science, as in there's a space before the S, and so we should get computer space science as an output. And that's it for string manipulation functions. Now there are other ways of slicing strings in Python, and I'm going to show you some of these examples on the next page, but for pseudocode this is all you need to know. So let's look at how we would do this in Python. So I've copied the pseudocode from the previous slide, and I'm just going to introduce the Python program on the right. So as you can see, we set up our variable in the normal way, but the important thing is that we don't have left, mid, or right as built-in functions in Python. We just use something called string slicing, which takes the starting position and then applies a length, so 1 character for letter A. For the second one, it starts at position 0 and goes 4 characters from that position. For the mid, it starts at position 3, but instead of just going 3 characters from that position, it's the end position, so it's 3 plus 3, which is 6. And for right, we've got the position at the end. We've used minus, it will start at the end of the string and go back 2 letters. And then the gap after the colon just means everything. So we can take it from -2, which is 2 characters back from the far right, to the end of the string. And the last one, concat, we've actually used before, and it's just the plus within a print statement or an assignment to a variable. So let's look at the built-in operations for maths. So all of these will need a number passed into it, so let's set one up. So we've declared a variable a as a real, and we've given it a value, 11.036729. If we wanted to display a rounded version of that, maybe to 2 decimal places, we could use the following. And so the function round takes 2 parameters, var a, which is the variable, and the number 2, which is the number of decimal points that you want to round it to. And so this would output the following. Because 0.036729 rounds up to 0.04. But sometimes we want the whole number, or the whole number part of the real number, and we can get rid of the entire decimal point, and this is called truncation. We can use a function called truncate to allow us to do this. And so if we output the truncation of variable a, we'll just get 11, because that's the whole number part of the real number. Another number operation that we could use is to generate a random number. For this we need to import a library. It's an external library called random. And of course the idea of importing a library already exists in Python. So you don't have to have that in your pseudocode, and of course this randint is actually a Python command. When you have a CIE question where you have to write pseudocode to use built-in functions, you usually get something known as an appendix, and that's something that's attached to the back of the exam paper or comes as a separate sheet, which gives you the commands that they want you to use in the exam. So this is an example of something that I would like you to use in future. So let's keep it simple and let's call randint, which generates a random integer number between 1 and 100. But of course, the variable a is a real number, and so we want to store it as a real number, not as an integer number. So we convert the random number between 1 and 100 into a floating point number. And so here's the pseudocode on the left hand side, and I've generated the Python that you need to replicate this on the outside. And this time we do have round as a function. Okay, it's built into Python, but truncate is not built into Python, so we use something called int. And this is on page 204 of the textbook. It just turns the floating point value, or the real value variable a, into an integer, similar to the way that float turns an integer into a real number. And then for import random, I said already this was a Python construct that you don't need to have in pseudocode, but we're setting variable a to be the floating point of the random integer between 1 and 100 that's been generated. And the only addition to the Python program is that I've added an output of the variable a so that you can see the random number that's generated.